Hi, everyone. I'm Ilya Aspis, and I'm excited to be with you today. It's rare one gets to take part in a conversation with someone whose invention has had a profound effect on society. Today, we have two people with us whose ideas transformed and improved the lives of millions of Americans. Some history. In 1978, Congress passed and Jimmy Carter signed into law a revision of the IRS tax code called the Revenue Act. Shortly thereafter, Ted Benna recognized that a new section of the tax code added to limit executive compensation had the potential to be used for tax advantage retirement savings. Benna became the first to establish a 401k plan, and because of his invention, Section 401k of the IRS tax code has become a metonym for working Americans' retirement accounts, the way the Pentagon is used to describe the Department of Defense or Rolodex refers to one's contacts. It is no exaggeration to say that Ted Benna's ideas went on to transform the way Americans live today. In 2010, nearly 30 years after the passage of the Revenue Act, which enabled 401k plans to come to life, Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The goal was twofold: to prevent another financial meltdown like the one we experienced a few years earlier, and to provide entrepreneurs with the ability to come up with financial innovations that banks were either unable or unwilling to create. In 2015, in the artificial light of his basement, Jason Lee, a former banker, developed and shaped the contours of what we now know as on-demand pay through the company he founded, Daily Pay. Since then, hundreds of copycat companies have sprouted, both in America and abroad, to offer workers the ability to access money they have earned but not yet been paid. This invention, as Time Magazine called it, one of the best of the year in 2021, has created newfound financial freedom for millions of families. Thanks to the technology he created, there is no more need for overdraft fees or late payments or even payday loans, particularly for those who could least afford them. Jason has since gone on to start a new company, Salt Labs, which empowers hourly workers to own the long-term value of their work. SALT is an employer-sponsored benefit that is controlled by the employees who use it, and has the potential to transform how America's workers save. Thank you both for being here today and taking part in our discussion. And Ted, maybe you could take a minute and tell us, why did you join Salt Labs as a strategic advisor?
And, Jason approached me with the idea and told him the goals that he had. There were certainly ones that were easy for me to embrace because, I have concern for the group of people that he's trying to reach. I get approached by a lot of people, who have the next new great idea. The difference is that many of them have a dream of something that would like to turn into some great thing, but they've never done anything that's been successful. Well, this is different. Jason has been successful.
When I introduced myself, I said, with all due respect, sir, I don't think the 401k is a great savings tool for the folks who I deal with every day, who are low-income folks. And Ted said, I agree. I knew that 30 years ago. He said, it's too expensive. And by the way, I had a whole speech I was going to give him, but he cut it about why it's expensive and why it does. And he already knew it 30 years ago. So this is why I'm excited about what we're doing is how do we retrain our brains, use better technology or more modern technology to be able to achieve this goal of trying to get lower income people up the savings curve.
Ted, you were the first person to recognize the potential that 401k had to impact the lives of Americans. Now it's nearly half a century later. What are the shortcomings of the 401k plan as it was written?
There's too much leakage when employees change jobs. That door could be closed. It's a big mistake when a 30 employee changes job and they get a bunch of papers that say, hey, one of the options you have is you can take your $15,000 you saved and do anything you want to with it. The temptation to use it for many things is a huge problem. So that door that would be gapped. Another one is when employees do retire, being able to maintain a stream of guaranteed income that will last for life is an issue.
What do you see as the next step in the evolution for workers to save for their retirement?
The big remaining issue is the fact that there's still almost 50% of American workers who don't have access, to a savings program. So that gap, needs to be closed for sure. and access, made available to them to be able to develop some form of savings. And a major reason why employers play a major role in this is the fact that most workers have difficulty, regardless of their earnings, saving on a regular basis. But those are in the bottom end, the mid to lower end employees are going paycheck for paycheck. And one of the things that 401k did, the reason it built up all the savings it did, is it successfully converted millions of workers from spenders into savers by making that the first priority. But from the bottom end, many of them, even if they were given the opportunity to be in a plan like a 401k, they just can't afford to do it.
Sort of extend that thought, maybe you could explain how Salt Labs is a new form of savings for people. For example, single mom making $25,000 or $30,000 a year who do have difficulty saving simply from their paycheck.
Boy, it's really hard to get someone who feels like their paycheck is really constrained to be able to take that limited resource and to go, sock that away. What we do at SALT is we sort of turn the whole savings mechanic on its head. What we like to say here is earn to save. But what if you were to create a totally separate account where an employee were to earn a different asset, a different source of value, one that is frankly non-fungible and non-transferable with their existing paycheck? Well, all of a sudden, that behavior and that dynamic actually encourages people to want to start to build a balance. Hey, here I am earning 1 SALT for every hour that I work. And all of a sudden, I've got 8 SALT. And tomorrow, I've got 16 SALT. And the next day, I've got 24 SALT. And what we then encourage folks to do is say, hey, look, you've got a great balance of SALT there. You can go exchange that for something that you would have wanted to save for in the first place. Maybe you always wanted to save for a family trip. Maybe you always wanted to save for, a discretionary item. Maybe you actually wanted to save for your child's very first 529 contribution. And that's really how we're addressing the savings problem. What we say is, hey, look, we know how difficult it is for you to take something out of your paycheck. So why not build something fresh, build something new that you are naturally inclined to want to build up?
SALT is now approaching 18 months old. Can you talk about some of the findings you've had, some of the things that have surprised you on the early life journey of the company?
When we first started developing SALT, we actually really thought of it almost like an employee reward. We said, hey, look, you get to earn this thing at work, almost a little bit like a frequent flyer mile. And the thing that I thought would happen, frankly, was people would take their SALT and they would go exchange it for cool things. These folks have sort of thought about SALT as a longer term store of value. They don't want to spend it. They want to save it. In fact, there were times where we would offer even cash equivalents to folks. Now, mind you, they were earning their SALT at no cost. And so we would then say, hey, look, folks, why don't you sell your SALT back to us for 10 cents a SALT, for 30 cents a SALT, for 50, up to $1. And in all of those situations, now remember, these are paycheck to paycheck folks. In all of those situations, something like only 1 in 5 would take us up on the offer. They don't want to spend it. They want to save it. And because they know they can always exchange their SALT for something else, it has independent value. This is a unique form of savings where an employee, for the first time ever, can actually see their balance increase. And that is something that is incredibly motivating, incredibly novel, and never before seen. Right now, when we look at the amount of SALT that is currently available for redemption, something like 80% of it is still just sitting there. Now, meaning it can be redeemed, but it's still just sitting there, unredeemed. And we look at that and we sort of say, that's really interesting. The validation that an employee is getting is not tied to the redemption of her SALT. It's actually tied to the fact that she can earn it and save it. And that's really what led me to TED, which was I said, for the first time ever, people in this demographic, in this income profile, have demonstrated a willingness to save. In this demographic, the savings rate's -2%. But the amount of salt that they're saving is something like 50 to 80%. We've been able to kind of create that dynamic merely by changing the form in which people can save.
What role do you think employers should have or play in helping employees save?
Look, employers are they're at the nexus of employee financial health. All of our money, for the most part, outside of inheritance, the lottery, 90% of the money that we make generally comes from work. But I think employers have figured out, guess what? When our employees feel financially healthy, financially secure, when they're able to meet their financial goals, that's good for business. It lowers turnover, it improves engagement, it increases retention. All of those things in human capital are beneficial to an operating of a business. We want to make sure that the end employee is not effectively subsidizing or effectively paying for this. And the reason why we think we can do it in this way is because we've proven that employees who earn SALT, they do feel better. They are validated. They are rewarded. They do save. They are financially healthy. And as a result, on average, they stay 54% longer than those who are not using SALT in the same employer.
What do you hope to accomplish with Salt Labs?
We would like to essentially make money. Now, I don't mean for ourselves. When we look at the savings rate of lower income people, as I said, it's -2%. They don't have any money. And in a way, by virtue of SALT becoming its individual store of value, well, that allows us to effectively create new value, new money, because they've been able to work for a couple of years, save up 10,000 SALT that has real value. When I started Daily Pay, overdraft fees were a massive, massive part of the income of various banking institutions. On average, it represented something like 3, and in some cases up to 20% of a bank's revenue. The revenue that's being driven by overdraft fees is down about 68% as of, call it, the end of last year. And we think we have a lot to do with that. That's real progress. We've literally changed the course here of people's financial lives. And that's what we want to do at SALT. 7 years from now, I would love there to be 10 million Americans walking around with thousands of dollars sitting in their SALT account of equivalent value, because they don't have that today. And that will be a mark of our success.
Do you mind sharing with our viewers reasons for optimism? 401k has been around for half a century, obviously transformed America. Can you make a case for optimism for America for the rest of this decade?
There is something unique about America and about American culture. And I can say this as a bit of an outsider. There is no place in the world that has the American entrepreneurial spirit. I also think the nation was founded as one nation under God. And I think that there is a special place that America has in the path of history. There is just something about our ability, our resilience, our desire to go create something better for ourselves that is in the DNA of this country. And that's why I'm exceptionally long-term, very, very optimistic on American dynamism. There are 1,000 problems out there, and I worry about AI and what's happening in China, and I worry about these things all the time, how that's going to impact my business, the economy, our children. But at the end of the day, the one thing that no one else has is the American entrepreneurial spirit.